What if I told you that the very things you're buying to protect your family could be putting you on a government watch list? That the preparations you're making for emergencies might actually be flagging you as a person of interest? Now, before you think this is some conspiracy theory, let me be clear. I'm not here to spread fear or paranoia. I'm here to give you facts, backed by legislation, government policies, and real-world cases. Because here's the truth. Being prepared is your right, but being informed about how that preparedness is monitored is your responsibility. My name is Your Name, and today we're going to talk about 12 specific items that can land you in government databases. Not because you're doing anything wrong, not because you're a criminal, but simply because these items raise red flags in our current surveillance landscape. And here's what makes this complicated. You have every right to prepare for emergencies. Natural disasters, economic collapse, civil unrest, these are real threats that responsible people prepare for. But in a post-9/11 world, where mass shootings make headlines and domestic terrorism is a genuine concern, the government has created systems to monitor activities that could indicate threats. So where's the line? How do you prepare responsibly without ending up on a list? That's exactly what we're going to explore today. We'll cover 12 items, explain why each one triggers monitoring, and most importantly, I'll give you practical alternatives and strategies to stay both prepared and under the radar. Stick around because item number 12 is the most controversial one, and it's probably something you've never even considered. Let's dive in. Let's start with the obvious one, ammunition. If you're buying large quantities of ammo, especially certain types, you're likely being tracked. Here's how it works. While there's no federal law requiring ammunition purchase tracking, many states have implemented their own systems. California, for example, requires background checks for all ammunition purchases and keeps records. But even in states without these laws, federal agencies are watching. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, the ATF, has what they call multiple sales reports for firearms. And while ammunition isn't technically included in the same way, dealers who sell large quantities to single individuals often report these transactions voluntarily, especially if they seem suspicious. What constitutes large quantities? There's no magic number, but buying thousands of rounds in a single transaction, especially in calibers like 5.56 NATO, 7.62, or 50 caliber, raises eyebrows. The logic is simple. The average gun owner doesn't need 5,000 rounds of ammunition. So if you're buying that much, what are you planning? Now, the irony here is that bulk buying actually makes financial sense. Ammunition prices fluctuate wildly, and buying in bulk saves money. Any experienced shooter knows this. But the optics are terrible. So what's the solution? Buy smaller quantities more frequently. Yes, you'll pay a bit more, but you'll also avoid triggering reporting thresholds. Diversify your suppliers. Don't buy everything from one store. Use different vendors, both online and in person. And if possible, consider private sales in states where they're legal. Though be aware that even these can sometimes be monitored through financial transactions. The key is understanding that it's not about the legality, it's about the pattern. Large, sudden purchases of ammunition look like someone preparing for violence, even if you're just stocking up for a decade of target practice. Body armor. It seems like a purely defensive item, right? You're not threatening anyone by owning a bulletproof vest. You're just protecting yourself. But governments see it differently. In most states, body armor is legal for civilians to own, but there's a catch. If you're a convicted felon, federal law prohibits you from possessing body armor. That alone means there's a tracking system in place, because they need to know who's buying it to enforce that law. But even if you're not a felon, certain purchases trigger attention. Level 3 and Level 4 plates, the kind that can stop rifle rounds, are particularly monitored. Why? Because mass shooters have used them. The Buffalo supermarket shooter wore body armor. The Uvalde shooter wore body armor. When these tragedies happen, the first question investigators ask is, where did they get their gear? Some states have gone further. New York now prohibits the sale of body armor to anyone outside of certain professions unless you purchase it in a face-to-face transaction. Connecticut restricts sales to in-person only. These laws are designed to create paper trails and make it harder to anonymously acquire armor.
Online retailers who sell body armor often report large or unusual purchases to law enforcement proactively. They don't want to be the company that sold gear to the next mass shooter. So if you're ordering multiple vests or high-level plates, expect that purchase to be noted somewhere. The alternative? If you genuinely need body armor for legitimate reasons, proper documentation is your friend. Keep receipts, have a clear explanation for why you need it, and consider lower-level soft armor for general preparedness rather than hard plates designed for combat scenarios. And here's something most people don't consider: the type of threat you're actually preparing for. If you're worried about civil unrest or home defense, soft armor that stops handgun rounds is probably sufficient. The person preparing for a realistic scenario versus someone preparing for a military-style conflict creates very different profiles. Night vision devices. These are some of the most heavily regulated items on this list, and for good reason from the government's perspective. Here's what you need to understand. High-end night vision, specifically Generation 3 and above, falls under something called ITAR, the International Traffic in Arms Regulations. These are the same regulations that control the export of missiles and fighter jets. The government considers advanced night vision to be military technology, and they track it accordingly. When you purchase Gen 3 night vision, the seller is required to verify that you're a U.S. citizen or legal permanent resident. Your information goes into a database. The logic is that they don't want this technology falling into the hands of foreign adversaries or terrorist organizations. But here's where it gets interesting for domestic preppers. Even though owning night vision is legal, the fact that you own it is recorded. And if you're buying multiple devices or pairing them with other items on this list, you start to look like someone building a tactical capability that goes beyond personal preparedness. Think about it from the government's perspective. Who needs military-grade night vision? Soldiers, law enforcement, and, well, people preparing for scenarios that involve nighttime operations. That last category makes them nervous. The alternatives are pretty straightforward. Generation 1 and Generation 2 night vision devices aren't subject to the same regulations. They're less capable, sure, but they're also completely adequate for most preparedness scenarios. Can you navigate in the dark? Can you see threats approaching your property at night? If yes, then you've met your need without triggering the same level of scrutiny. Thermal imaging is another option. While higher-end thermal devices can also be monitored, they're generally less regulated than night vision, and for many applications, they're actually more effective. You can spot heat signatures through fog, smoke, and foliage that traditional night vision can't penetrate. The bottom line is this: if you're buying Gen 3 night vision, accept that your purchase is being recorded and have a legitimate explanation ready if anyone ever asks. Water purification might seem like the most innocent item on this list. After all, clean water is a basic human need. But when we're talking about industrial-scale purification systems, the government pays attention. Here's why. Large-scale water purification often involves chemicals, and certain chemicals have dual uses. They can purify water, or they can be used to manufacture drugs or explosives. The DEA and EPA both monitor purchases of these chemicals. If you're buying a small water filter for camping, no one cares. If you're buying a system that can purify thousands of gallons, questions start being asked. Who are you purifying water for? Why do you need that capacity? Are you planning to set up a compound? Are those chemicals really for water treatment? The Oklahoma City bombing changed everything about how the government monitors chemical purchases. Timothy McVeigh used fertilizer and other readily available materials to create a bomb that killed 168 people. Since then, purchases of anything that could potentially be weaponized are tracked. Now you might be thinking, but I just want to be able to provide clean water for my community in an emergency. And that's a perfectly legitimate goal. But from the government's perspective, someone buying industrial equipment is either planning for a very large group of people, which raises questions about who these people are, or they're covering for another purpose. The solution? Scale matters. A high-quality residential water filtration system can provide for a family indefinitely. Berkey filters, reverse osmosis systems, and similar products are extremely effective and don't trigger the same concerns. If you're preparing for a larger group, consider multiple smaller systems rather than one industrial setup.
Also, understand the chemicals you're using. Chlorine tablets for water purification are common and acceptable. Ordering large quantities of more obscure chemicals will definitely get attention. Stick to well-known, clearly labeled products intended for residential use. And here's a strategy many preppers overlook: community preparedness. Instead of one person having an industrial system, multiple households, each having their own, creates resilience without the red flags. You achieve the same goal with a completely different profile. Ham radio might seem old-fashioned, but it's actually one of the most powerful tools for off-grid communication, and that's exactly why it's monitored. The FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, licenses all ham radio operators. When you get your license, your information goes into a public database. Your name, your address, your call sign, all publicly searchable. So right off the bat, the government knows who has radio capabilities. But it goes deeper than that. High-powered transmitters, especially HF radios that can communicate across continents, are specifically tracked. Why? Because communication capability equals coordination capability. If the government is worried about militia groups or domestic terrorists, one of their first questions is, how are these people coordinating? After major incidents, one of the first things law enforcement does is check if suspects had ham radio licenses. They want to know if there's a network of people who can communicate outside of normal channels that the government can monitor. The solution here is actually pretty simple. Get your license. Operating without a license is illegal anyway and attracts far more attention. A licensed ham radio operator is just a hobbyist. An unlicensed person with radio equipment is suspicious by definition. Keep your operations legal and within the bounds of ham radio regulations. Don't talk about anything on the radio that you wouldn't want recorded, because many people monitor ham frequencies. And understand that emergency communication networks, while legal and even encouraged, are definitely noted by authorities who want to know what communication infrastructure exists outside their control. The irony is that ham radio operators are often valuable during disasters, helping coordinate emergency services when normal communications fail. It's a completely legitimate and even praised activity. But the capability itself is what matters to surveillance systems. Food storage is fundamental to preparedness. Every survival expert says the same thing: start with food and water. But when does a reasonable stockpile become a red flag? The answer is when it looks like you're feeding an army, literally. If you're ordering pallets of MREs, the military's meals ready to eat, someone's paying attention. MRE manufacturers sell to civilians, but they also report large purchases. The question is always, who are you feeding? A year's supply of food for a family of 4 is one thing. Enough food for 50 people is another. The government's concern is about compounds, militias, and groups preparing for armed conflict rather than individuals preparing for disasters. There's also the financial tracking aspect. Large purchases trigger reporting requirements under various banking and anti-money laundering laws. If you're spending $10,000 on freeze-dried food in a single transaction, that transaction gets reported to the IRS. It's not illegal, but it's noted. This is where religious and cultural considerations actually provide cover. Members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints are encouraged to keep a year's supply of food. They've been doing this for generations, and it's a well-known practice. If you have a legitimate cultural or religious reason for food storage, you're far less likely to raise concerns. The smart approach is gradual accumulation. Buy a little extra every shopping trip. Build your stockpile over time rather than in massive bulk orders. Diversify suppliers so you're not ordering everything from one company. And focus on staples that can be purchased at regular grocery stores: rice, beans, canned goods, flour, sugar, salt. Freeze-dried specialty foods are convenient, but they're also expensive and create obvious paper trails. A cart full of regular groceries every week looks normal. A pallet delivery of survival food does not. Also, consider the storage question. Where are you putting all this food? If you're renting storage units for food, that's unusual. If you're building a large storage facility on your property, that might trigger building permits and inspections that reveal your stockpile. The goal is invisible preparedness. You want to be ready for emergencies without advertising that fact to the world. Gold and silver have been stores of value for thousands of years. In a collapse scenario, they're far more useful than paper money.
But buying significant quantities of precious metals puts you squarely on government radar. Here's the law. Any cash transaction over $10,000 must be reported to the IRS on Form 8300. This applies to precious metals dealers who are required to collect your information and report the transaction. And cash doesn't just mean physical bills. It includes cashier's checks, money orders, and any cash equivalents. But it goes beyond just the $10,000 threshold. Dealers also have to report suspicious patterns. If you're making multiple purchases just under $10,000, that's called structuring, and it's illegal. People do this thinking they're avoiding reporting requirements, but it's actually more suspicious than just reporting the large purchase in the first place. The government's concern with precious metals is multifaceted. 1, they want to track assets for tax purposes. 2, large gold purchases can indicate money laundering. 3, people who are moving significant wealth into precious metals are, by definition, people who don't trust the financial system. And people who don't trust the system are people the system wants to monitor. There's also the question of what you're preparing for. Someone buying gold is often someone who thinks the dollar will collapse. That's not illegal, but it does create a profile. Are you just a smart investor, or are you a radical who's preparing for the end of government? The strategies here are nuanced. Smaller purchases over time avoid reporting thresholds. Private sales between individuals are generally not reported, though the seller should be aware of their own tax obligations. And mixing your precious metals purchases with other investment strategies makes you look like a balanced investor, rather than an extremist prepper. Also, consider the form of your metals. Jewelry and numismatic coins have different reporting requirements than bullion. There are ways to hold precious metals that are less trackable, though all legal, of course. And here's something crucial: storage. If you're buying metals, where are you keeping them? Safe deposit boxes are bank property and can be accessed by the government with a warrant. Home safes can be found with metal detectors. Burying them on your property has its own risks. The logistics of precious metal security are complex and beyond the scope of this video, but understand that how you store your wealth is as important as how you acquire it. Medical preparedness makes sense. In a disaster, hospitals might be overwhelmed or inaccessible. Having the ability to treat injuries and illnesses on your own is smart. But when you start stockpiling prescription medications and surgical equipment, you enter regulated territory. Antibiotics are the big one. In a long-term disaster scenario, access to antibiotics could be the difference between life and death from a simple infection. But in the United States, antibiotics require a prescription. You can't legally stockpile them unless a doctor prescribes them to you. This is where people get creative, and this is where they get into trouble. Some preppers order fish antibiotics, which are the same compounds as human antibiotics but marketed for aquarium use. Legally gray, definitely monitored. Others try to buy from overseas pharmacies or Mexican border towns, also monitored and potentially illegal. The DEA tracks all controlled substances obsessively. If you're trying to acquire pain medications, sedatives, or anything with abuse potential, you're definitely in a database. Doctors who overprescribe are flagged. Pharmacies that fill suspicious prescriptions are investigated. The system is designed to prevent drug diversion, but it also catches preppers in its net. Surgical equipment is less regulated but still noted. If you're buying sutures, scalpels, and other surgical tools in quantity, medical supply companies often report it. The concern is either unlicensed medical practice or, in extreme cases, equipment being used for torture or illegal procedures. The illegal alternatives are limited but real. Get first aid training, advanced first aid training, wilderness responder courses. The more trained you are, the less equipment dependent you become. Stockpile over-the-counter medications legally. Build relationships with medical professionals who understand preparedness and might be willing to work with you on prescriptions for legitimate preventative care. There's also the veterinary supply route, though I'll mention it with caution. Many veterinary medications are identical to human versions. Preppers have been using this loophole for years, but understand that it's being closed. Laws are tightening, and purchases are increasingly monitored. The reality is that true medical preparedness requires knowledge more than supplies. A well-trained person with basic supplies can do more than an untrained person with a surgical suite.
Focus on skills first, supplies second, and always stay within legal boundaries, even when those boundaries seem frustrating. Fuel is essential for generators, vehicles, and heating, but storing large quantities of gasoline or diesel brings you into contact with multiple regulatory agencies. Fire codes exist in every jurisdiction, and they strictly limit how much fuel you can store residentially. Typically, you're allowed a few 5-gallon cans, maybe 25 gallons total. Beyond that, you need special permits and storage facilities that meet commercial safety standards. The fire marshal can inspect your property and, if they find violations, can fine you and require removal of the fuel. But beyond local fire codes, there are environmental regulations. The EPA monitors fuel storage because leaking tanks contaminate groundwater. If you're storing hundreds of gallons, they want to know about it. There's also the terrorism angle. Fuel is a weapon. The 1995 Oklahoma City bombing used fuel oil as part of the bomb. Vehicle attacks use fuel. Arson uses fuel. Someone stockpiling large quantities of fuel is someone who might be planning something destructive. The solution is staying within legal limits for your area. If you need backup power, consider propane, which has different storage regulations and is often easier to store in quantity. Solar power with battery storage eliminates fuel needs entirely, though the cost is higher. For vehicles, keep your tanks full rather than stockpiling fuel separately. A full tank in each family vehicle, plus your legal allowance of gas cans, gives you a reasonable emergency reserve without violating codes. And consider alternatives to traditional fuel. Diesel stores longer than gasoline. Fuel stabilizers can extend storage life. But ultimately, trying to stockpile months' worth of fuel is both legally problematic and practically difficult given fuel degradation over time. We touched on this earlier with the Oklahoma City bombing, but it deserves its own section. Certain fertilizers are now strictly monitored because of their explosive potential. Ammonium nitrate is the big one. It's an effective fertilizer, but it's also the main component Timothy McVeigh used in his bomb. After that attack, Congress passed laws requiring sellers to verify the identity of purchasers, report sales, and in some cases, refuse sales altogether. If you buy significant quantities of ammonium nitrate fertilizer, your name goes into a database. The Department of Homeland Security tracks these purchases. They're looking for patterns,
Large purchases, purchases from multiple sources, purchases combined with other concerning items. For most preppers, the goal with fertilizer is food production. You want to grow your own food for self-sufficiency. But from the government's perspective, someone buying farming supplies might be preparing for agriculture or might be preparing for something far darker. The reality is that modern organic farming methods and permaculture techniques can reduce or eliminate the need for synthetic fertilizers anyway. Composting, cover crops, crop rotation, and natural soil amendments are more sustainable and don't raise any red flags. If you do need synthetic fertilizers, choose types that don't have explosive potential. There are plenty of options that work well for gardens and small-scale farming without containing ammonium nitrate. And buy from local garden centers in reasonable quantities rather than ordering bulk agricultural amounts online. The distinction between a gardener and a threat is often just a matter of scale and type. A pickup truck full of fertilizer heading to a farm is normal. The same truck at an urban apartment building is suspicious. Context matters, and the government is very good at analyzing context. Digital privacy is its own battlefield. The government wants the ability to monitor communications for national security. Privacy advocates want protection from surveillance, and preppers fall somewhere in the middle, wanting operational security without appearing to have something to hide. Strong encryption is legal. Using a VPN is legal. Encrypted messaging apps like Signal are legal. But mass adoption of these technologies is recent, and heavy users are still outliers who attract attention. Intelligence agencies track who uses privacy tools. They can't necessarily break the encryption, but they can see that you're using it. And the metadata tells a story. Who are you talking to? When? How often? Even if they can't read your messages, patterns of communication reveal a lot. The Tor browser, which anonymizes your internet traffic, is particularly controversial. It's used by journalists, activists, and people in oppressive regimes to protect themselves. It's also used by criminals. Using Tor isn't illegal, but it definitely puts you on a list of people who value anonymity enough to take special steps.
Here's the paradox. The more you try to hide, the more interesting you become. Someone who uses normal social media and email is invisible in the crowd. Someone who uses only encrypted, anonymized communication stands out precisely because they're trying not to. The strategy is balanced privacy. Use privacy tools for genuinely sensitive information, but maintain a normal digital footprint as well. Don't disappear entirely from the digital world, as that absence itself is suspicious. And understand that true anonymity in the modern surveillance state is nearly impossible. Accept a reasonable level of monitoring and reserve your strongest security measures for what truly matters. Also, be aware of your social media presence regarding preparedness. Posting pictures of your stockpile, your weapons, your gear makes you a target both for criminals who might rob you and for agencies who are building profiles of potential extremists. The prepper community has a saying: loose lips sink ships. In the digital age, loose posts sink preppers. Finally, we arrive at number 12, and this is the big one. A fully established bug-out location, especially an off-grid compound, is the ultimate prepper goal for many people. It's also the single biggest red flag you can wave at federal agencies. Think about what a bug-out property implies. You're planning to leave society. You're establishing a fortified location away from government oversight. You're stockpiling everything we've discussed in this video in one concentrated location. And you're often doing this with a group of like-minded people, which means you're organizing. The government has a long history of monitoring compounds: Ruby Ridge, Waco, the Montana Freeman. These incidents, whether you think the government was right or wrong in how they handled them, established a pattern. Remote properties with armed occupants preparing for confrontation are considered threats. Building permits and inspections become issues. If you're building structures, most jurisdictions require permits, even in rural areas. If you're building bunkers, you definitely need permits. And when inspectors see what you're creating, reports get filed. Utility disconnection raises questions. If you're going completely off-grid, the power company knows. the water company knows. That information is accessible to law enforcement. Someone who doesn't want to be connected to the grid is someone who wants to operate independently of oversight. Land purchases are public record. If you're buying property, especially if you're using cash or trusts to hide your identity, that itself is interesting to investigators. They want to know who's buying land, why they're trying to hide, and what they're planning to do with it. The solution here is integration, not isolation. A retreat property that's used regularly for recreation, that maintains connections to utilities, that complies with all local regulations, looks like a vacation home. A compound that's hidden, fortified, and occupied by armed groups looks like a threat. If you're building a preparedness location, do it legally. Get all required permits. Maintain good relationships with neighbors. Don't create an us versus them mentality with local authorities. The goal is to be seen as a responsible property owner who happens to be well prepared, not a radical who's waiting for society to collapse. And frankly, the most secure retreat is one that no one knows about. Don't post about it online. Don't tell people who don't need to know. Operational security means your bug-out location remains a secret to everyone except your immediate group. So, we've covered 12 items that can put you in databases. Now let's talk about the legal framework and what your rights actually are. First, understand that most monitoring is completely legal. The Fourth Amendment protects you from unreasonable searches and seizures, but it doesn't protect you from the government knowing about transactions you voluntarily make with businesses that are required to report them. When you buy something from a dealer who reports to the ATF, you're not being searched, you're engaging in commerce, and that commerce has reporting requirements. The Supreme Court has consistently held that these requirements don't violate your constitutional rights. The Second Amendment protects your right to keep and bear arms. It doesn't protect your right to do so anonymously. You can own guns, you can own ammunition, you can own everything we've discussed in this video, but the government can know about it. So what triggers an actual investigation? It's almost never one item. It's patterns. If you're buying ammunition and body armor and night vision and building a compound and stockpiling fuel and posting extremist content online, that's when you become a person of interest. The FBI and DHS use what they call fusion centers, where information from multiple agencies and sources is combined.
Your ammunition purchase from one database, your land purchase from public records, your social media posts from monitoring. They all get put together into a profile. Most people never cross the threshold that triggers active investigation. You're in a database, but so are millions of other people. The databases are searched when there's a reason to search them. If a crime occurs, they look at who in the area has the capability to commit that crime. If intelligence suggests a threat, they look at who matches the profile. Here's what you need to understand. Being in a database isn't the same as being investigated. It's not the same as being suspected of a crime. It's just information that exists. Whether it ever matters depends on what else you do and whether any future events make that information relevant. Your rights include refusing searches without a warrant. If law enforcement shows up at your property without a warrant, you don't have to let them in. You don't have to answer questions. You can invoke your Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination and your Sixth Amendment right to an attorney. But here's practical advice. If you're doing everything legally, cooperation often serves you better than confrontation. If you refuse to talk to police, you might be within your rights, but you also look like you have something to hide. If you calmly explain that you're a prepared citizen, show them documentation for your purchases, and demonstrate that everything is legal, you often end the interaction favorably. The goal is never to be interesting to investigators in the first place. Stay legal, stay balanced. Don't match the profile of an extremist, and most importantly, don't commit crimes. The vast majority of preppers never have problems because they're not doing anything wrong. Let's get practical. How do you prepare effectively while minimizing your profile? First, embrace the gray man concept. This comes from tactical training and means blending in. Don't advertise your preparedness. Don't wear tactical clothing in public. Don't put prepper bumper stickers on your car. Don't post about your stockpile on social media. The best prepared person is the one no one knows is prepared. Second, diversify everything.
Diversify suppliers so you're not buying everything from one place. Diversify your storage so you don't have everything in one location. Diversify your skills so you're not dependent on equipment. Diversification reduces risk across the board. Third, focus on skills over gear. The most prepared person isn't the one with the most equipment, it's the one with the most knowledge. Learn first aid, learn gardening, learn basic mechanics, learn how to purify water without fancy equipment. Skills can't be confiscated and don't show up in databases. Fourth, build community carefully. Preparedness is better done in groups, but groups attract attention. The key is choosing your community wisely. Like-minded families in your neighborhood who prepare quietly together are very different from an organized militia that trains in uniform. One is a neighborhood watch. The other is a potential domestic terrorism concern. Fifth, maintain operational security without paranoia. You can't achieve complete anonymity in modern America. Accept that. But you can minimize your footprint. Use cash for some purchases, buy locally when possible, don't consolidate all your preparedness in one place or time, and never assume anything digital is private. Sixth, keep documentation. Receipts, permits, licenses, everything. If you're ever questioned about your preparedness activities, documentation proves you're operating legally. It turns, "Why do you have all this?" into, "Here's proof I bought it legally and I have every right to own it." And seventh, understand your local laws. Regulations vary wildly by state and even by county. What's legal in rural Montana might be illegal in urban California. Research your specific jurisdiction and stay within those bounds. We've covered a lot of ground today. 12 items that can put you in government databases, ranging from obvious ones like ammunition to surprising ones like water purification systems and bug-out properties. But here's what I want you to take away from this video. Being prepared is not criminal. It's not extremist. It's not paranoid. It's responsible. Every government, every military, every business prepares for contingencies. Why shouldn't you? The challenge is navigating a surveillance state where preparedness activities overlap with activities that genuinely dangerous people also engage in. The person stockpiling ammunition for target practice looks the same in a database as the person stockpiling ammunition for violence. The person buying body armor for personal protection looks the same as the person buying it for a mass shooting. And that's not fair, but it's reality. So you have to be smarter.
You have to prepare in ways that maintain your operational capability while minimizing your profile. You have to stay legal, stay balanced, and stay under the radar. Remember, the goal of preparedness is security. But if your preparedness activities make you a target of investigation, you've actually reduced your security. There's a balance to strike, and finding that balance is as important as any other aspect of being prepared. I want to be clear about something. I'm not suggesting you shouldn't prepare. I'm suggesting you prepare intelligently. Every item on this list can be acquired legally and responsibly. You just need to understand the implications and plan accordingly. And if you find yourself thinking, this is too much work, there are too many restrictions, the government shouldn't be monitoring legal activities, I don't disagree with the sentiment, but disagreeing with the reality doesn't change it. You can advocate for privacy rights, for less government overreach, for better laws. But in the meantime, you have to operate within the system that exists. So here's my final thought. The most dangerous prepper is the one who doesn't understand they're being monitored. The second most dangerous is the one who knows but doesn't care and proceeds recklessly. The truly prepared person is the one who understands the landscape, respects the laws, and operates with both capability and discretion. Preparedness isn't about fear. It's about responsibility. And part of that responsibility is understanding how your actions are perceived and adjusting accordingly. You can be prepared and private. You can be capable and careful. You can have everything you need for any emergency without painting a target on your back. That's what smart preparedness looks like in the 21st century. If you found this video valuable, I'd appreciate it if you'd like and subscribe.
Drop a comment below telling me which item on this list surprised you the most. And if you want to continue this conversation, I have more videos on operational security, legal preparedness, and practical survival skills. Stay safe, stay legal, and stay prepared. Until next time. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. Laws vary by jurisdiction and change over time. Consult with a qualified attorney in your area before making any decisions based on this content. The information presented reflects the state of regulations and policies as understood at the time of recording and may not reflect current laws or practices. Always verify current laws in your specific location and situation.